the bag causing an explosion to happen. Smoke emerged from it, deceiving the ducks about John Chen. But this was perfect. This was the one chance he had to manage to escape. But as soon as he escaped, we then saw our pan left behind while the pat and the pen simultaneously searched for our hero. But at this mom meant John Chen was underwater. This was also the unique opportunity for him to use his maximum swimming skill to escape from there. However, it seemed to finally escape. He used a few strategies. The first was also a smoke bomb, and inside that smoke bomb he put some fireworks, which helped a lot to distract that group of ducks. While swimming around, he kept worrying about the ducks, because if the ducks happened to find our protagonist underwater, with their swimming speed, they would catch him quickly. But while swimming he saw a shadow passing near him, though he didn't see what it really was. Still, he shouldn't worry too much, since the main monsters there should only be a few. Hey man, he didn't have much time to relax, as at that moment the shadow he had seen before quickly approached him from behind. To avoid being caught, he turned around, and as soon as he did, he found that the pen was surprised to see that he chose to flee rather than fight. Junction realized what he was saying was too loud, and he saw that it would draw the duck's attention. He thought this pen was too much of a traitor, but there was much to do at that moment, since the pen gave away his location. The duck found him, and on finding him, the ducks began running towards him as a group. The pen asked him to get up and use some magic to defend himself, and all this was because of the pen. The pen only wondered why he hadn't fought well earlier. He ended up saying he didn't want to. After all, he was almost managing to escape from the ducks, but now the ducks were nearly capturing our protagonist. However, to avoid being caught, he ran. While running, he looked at the map, but running ahead, he saw on the map that there was no way out. So while running, the pen still wondered why he wouldn't turn around and try to fight these ducks. At this moment, to avoid getting caught by the ducks, he completely ignored the hen that kept making up some nonsense. He ended up running through those rocks, trying to find a way out as quickly as possible. He jumped over some rocks, and after jumping he landed on the ground. But at that moment one of the ducks had already caught up with our protagonist. He was about to be caught, but more quickly our hero dodged. After dodging, he decided to look ahead, and as soon as he did, he found him. So, Alf, surrounded once again by this wave of ducks. But I think he made a mistake using that smoke bomb, because after a while he realized there were more ducks than usual here. While he was wondering about that, he ended up finding a different dog, because among these dogs there was a more skilled duck than the others. Moreover, this skilled ducks started marking our hero. Knowing he had no more choice and didn't know how to escape, he thought of using that. After thinking about it, he used those little dolls he could control. So after thinking about it, he put it into practice, summoning several dolls similar to them, but the dolls did nothing. And while they did nothing, the other skilled ducks started doing some things, advancing toward our hero. But to avoid, he dodges. Now that he dodged, he realizes why his skill that he had just used didn't work properly. The pen tells him to look more directly, since to use that skill there it was necessary to make a realistic drawing. More than that, so to redo that skill again, the pen ends up giving John Chen some extra hints. Now she asks that our hero use more of that in a special way, making his drawing become something powerful. So he wonders if with that he could possibly make that doll move. The pan responds that he could do that, but he didn't have much time, as that skillful duck seemed to make a command, where we then observe from behind the entire group of that duck advancing towards our hero. But not to be caught, our hero uses something to defend himself. Defending himself, he realizes that the attack from this monster was heavy. He might not be able to reach the speed of a monster like this, but he also I couldn't stay still, because fighting a monster like this was difficult, but he needed to win. but this didn't help much because the monsters did several attack combos on him, hitting all the combos on our hero. Now that he is fighting against the monster, he wonders if this is really how you fight, or maybe it isn't, but quickly he looks in the direction of those monsters. They are his clones, but while he was watching his clones he kept wondering in his mind, why is he so weak, since he couldn't even hold a single duck like this, a weak duck, but to defeat the duck he needed to try all or nothing. That's how he talks about it. He starts advancing in the direction of those drawings he made before, but while advancing he thought he needed to increase more there than one of his fire points. While running he looked at his MP, where he realizes he was using a lot of it, so to maybe have a chance to win he needed to get close to those little creatures he summoned before, and as he gets closer and closer he starts imagining those dolls moving. While imagining this, the hen drew this in practice. The dolls start moving with eyes. After that, our protagonist realizes that they were coming to life, because the dolls start running towards the ducks, while the ducks were already commenting to themselves that these clones just now were standing still, but why were these things moving quickly in their direction? But those ducks wouldn't do anything until they saw one of the dolls jump on them, but seeing that maybe these dolls could be weak, they start doing some combo there on the dolls that not even the ducks had difficulty to finish off our protagonist's clone. While there they were easily defeating those paper man. We observed from behind the pan, thinking it was too weak. John Chen even says it was paper, they only used it to distract those ducks. Now that it distracted them they could run, so he runs towards a rack that was broken here and for of him. Then he manages to dodge the dodge, but looking at his leg he realizes that it took some damage, so moving forward a little he thought about stopping because he needed to bandage that up soon, but he couldn't stay still here, because moving forward a little he notices something strange inside this portal. He realizes that there is a day darker inside, and so then we observe him picking up that map, but as soon as he touches that map he realizes that this thing in front of him here where boss, but he wonders why a boss was here on this floor, since before it was said that the bosses inside the portal would be completely sealed, so they shouldn't worry about this. He realizes that it was weak, but why this thing that was open on his map, but he hears the noise of those ducks again, which makes him scared, so he thinks that he should run away from here immediately, otherwise the ducks would find him again. But he didn't have much choice, because the ducks found him faster than he thought. Something comes in his direction and he is almost caught, but now that he has surrounded again he needs in any way to survive, because those monsters were getting more and more hungry to defeat John Chen. But at this moment they were thinking about it, they stop, they get scared by the thing, which makes him quite happy. And so could it be that these ducks were afraid of him? But no, he asks for them to stop because he emitted no fear. What he felt was a pressure, and they wouldn't be afraid of our hero, they were afraid of something else. Then he slowly turns around, and as he turns he realizes that behind him was the boss of this floor, which makes him freeze completely at this moment. Looking back, getting scared, he tries to understand, and tries to ask himself how the hell was the boss here. He should have been entering inside that portal, find the boss, but no, the boss was cool, came out of the portal to meet our hero. The fight should be worthy of both sides. While he was thinking about in the association here, we can observe some guy saying that they had quite big losses, but they didn't need to worry so much, since their guild kind of ends up paying everything they ended up losing. If they lost equipment they paid for new equipment for them. He realizes that everything he did was also all part of his plan, but at this moment he approaches two people who were talking about something curious. He asks what was going on, and for that both reply that a level 3 hunter just entered the level 3 portal, but for some reason the portal he entered ended up being sealed, which makes this manager quite worried about things, because he entered a dungeon where there was no boss, but if it's sealed it's because there was a boss. Yes, he then asks to deliver this thing here, where there was information about our hero. Our hero tried to enter the dungeon alone. They even asked him not to do that. As soon as he heard that, he thinks that this guy was too stupid for seeing that he was wanting too much greed things. Enter the portal alone, and by the way, he was level 3. What was he thinking of doing in a portal like this alone? But already ignoring this, ends up discovering the They realized that he wasn't part of any group, which made them quite interested in our protagonist, for seeing that also he has a hidden class, which can get very good benefits for them and their guild. But after thinking a bit, he ends up thinking that no, he doesn't want to hire this guy for his guild. No, maybe he would be just some trash. He entered the dungeon alone, and if he has healed inside, it would be just some trash that would be disposable. Besides, he has other bigger priorities to solve, because some people are entering inside the dungeon inside their guild's portal, but for some reason some people who enter there never come back to Earth. So then he has something like priorities to solve. These things were to kill some bosses, so he advances. While advancing, the scene here is already caught now to our hero here, but this thing was maybe not the time to appear. But the boss barely appearing already then uses his hammer to hit our hero, who, after being hit, is thrown far away, which makes him then be thrown against the wall. Now against the wall we observe our pen. They are annoying him, while he saw that if by chance he hadn't used his arms to defend himself, he would already be all broken on the ground. But meanwhile we observe the boss that from another place was already attacking other things. These things were the duck 6 at this moment. Then he saw that this boss attacked everything in front of him, so already knowing that the boss was against the ducks also gathered to attack the boss. He now then takes his chance he gained to try to get out of this dungeon, but the pen said it was impossible, since here at the moment the boss appeared, and it was impossible or someone to come out of the portal. Knowing that they can't escape, he has one last option, that was his backpack. In the backpack there were some smoke bombs that he could use to get away, but there were also some good potions in there. The pen wondered why he cared so much about this backpacks, and he could easily fight against this boss of his much more easily than he was imagining. While running the system shows there that he had already managed to defeat some monsters, and then for having managed to kill, that he ended up almost completing the mission. However, to complete the entire mission he needed to kill the boss, but he already had a winning strategy. He just needed that backpack of his. With that backpack in hand he could certainly defeat that boss, but defeat how's that possible? Because at that moment, we then observed the boss attacking our protagonist again. Our protagonist saw only in the reflection of his eyes that sledgehammer approaching him, and then he was caught by it, but he quickly dodges that attack using one of his abilities with those papers. But by having used that ability, he ended up losing one of his papers, which means he basically lost one of his lives. But well, he wasn't stupid. He would use the papers that remained in the air to burn the boss alive anyway. Then he uses his fire or ability, which completely ignites the boss. The boss, while engulfed in the fire, still wondered how he could possibly defeat something that was extremely fire-resistant. Wondering, as we only observed that boy walking towards our hero. Now he simply saw that approaching, but he couldn't do anything. Then he ends up getting hit squarely by that sledgehammer. Now that he was caught, he asks himself again if he was weak, but also, with the abilities this monster had, how would he defeat something like this? He was thrown against the wall again, but still he didn't give up. He gets up and grabs that backpack of his again. He used his last clone again, but now by half, and use at his mana drop to 0. Furthermore, he sees the monster approaching, and again he realizes that the fire ability he had thrown at it was useless, since the fire didn't even have an effect on this monster. But looking on the bright side, this was the strongest boss he had ever faced in his life, and still survived for so long. But he still wondered if the system wasn't messing with him by putting him in a situation like this. Right, the boss was strong, he was just a loser. While thinking of giving up, the system appears again, saying that if he loses this fight he will receive a punishment. So perhaps ignoring this system he sees that after so many life or death fights, he ended up in this one, where he can be sure he won't have the same chance as before. He just wanted to live as an adventurer because it was the opportunity he could earn money, but he also wanted to live a decent life outside these hurdles. So he still didn't want to die like this. He gained motivation at that moment, and as he gained this motivation, at end of hours approaches our hero saying that this was what he needed, motivation. At this moment as he approaches, we observe the boss attacking John Chen, but instead of hitting him, our hero ends up quickly using that smoke bag, which makes the monster lose track of our protagonist for a few minutes, giving him the chance to run to the side. Now from the side we then observe the pen saying something there to our hero. It was just to follow it. The first thing, grab it. Grabbing it firmly is the pen as 6. Our hero to imagine a hard and strong sword. Well, he could use that to fight against his opponent. While he was imagining some crazy things in his head, we observe him thinking that this was life or death. The monster had the heaviest weight in the world, holding it in its arms, but he needed to be smarter and stronger than them. But also he has done notice that the monster's skin was made of steel, as no fire has any effect on this thing, so he needed to defeat it since he never even had the chance to fight against a monster like this as an adventurer. But what weapon would you use to defeat something like this? So for that he needed to imagine his strongest force. While he also thought that this boss would not dodge his attack, he would simply make his move with his hammer in his direction, which would hit him, and so it was done. But now he wondered what kind of direction this boss would be attacking our hero in. He didn't know. Furthermore, he was moving here at heights he purely due to adrenaline, but he also began to stop and think because he saw that this monster always made attacks in a specific area. After imagining, he already knew what his next move would be, and as soon as he imagined this, we observed the boss attacking Jian Chan. The pan asked him to dodge, but our hero did not do so, as he then moved that pan and hand in one direction. And at that moment here he managed to dodge the attack, but the pan asked him to still be careful, because this boss could counter-attack, and thus he discovered that this boss only made an attack in one direction, so he couldn't change the move, which gave him the chance to defeat this boss with a single move. Our hero managed to split the monster in half. Now that he split the monster in half with the help of that pen, he was happy to see that it was all over, and also for having used all this power here, he ended up completely exhausting his mana. This was his mana, so before the boss could get up again, he needed to finish him off as quickly as possible. Then he asked the pen to transform once again, and so it was done. From above, the boss, our protagonist, then attacked him, saying that it still wasn't enough, so he ended up setting the weapon on fire as well to make his blow stronger, and with that he ended the boss his life. He was happy, and the system appeared congratulating him for having killed a boss, and for that he finally reached level 4. Now he also gained new abilities. One of these abilities is the pen's random transformation, which can give him powers that would possibly be something unimaginable to him. Now also seeing the bar boss, he fell because his adrenaline had disappeared, making him unable to move anymore, but still he got up because he saw that the pen's ability was to transform into anything. The pen said that he had no choice and had to follow the system's rules. Now that he defeated the boss, he left the portal, but as soon as he left, he reported all this to this person here, but the person with a face that would trust a level 4 guy ended up mocking him, saying that maybe all that he entered in the portal was an illusion. Boss, what boss? The association has nothing to do with it, but still the association thanks him for his feedback, so he could already withdraw. While he was thinking about leaving, someone in the background said not to worry because he checked the situation, and what he said was indeed true, so he wasn't a liar here. Then the guy called him to the manager, and now this manager would have a talk with the one who almost ambushed our hero, and our story today continues with that mysterious man still stay landing watching our hero. He then, after a good while, congratulates our protagonist for being a guy who alone managed to finish our hand dungeon, all by himself, and because of this he ended up earning some pretty good resources, and all those resources, he won will basically be deposited into his account at this Moromit. So after delivering this information they begin to stare at each other. After staring for a while everyone suddenly starts moving towards their own side. Our hero follows his path while talking to the hand. The pen gets worried. This and the person he had seen dead is alive, so he asks the person beside him here to get back to work. While he ends up calling a certain person elsewhere, a cell phone starts ringing, and at this moment we observe that spoiled guy from earlier, who was irritated with Chang answer the call. He then wonders what happened as manager Jim is calling him personally. He ends up questioning what the situation is about. A dungeon of harps is in the east corridor district. Maybe they were using some kind of cheating, like using corpses to exploit a certain bug. There to be one of the best in the dungeon. Then he comments that some media outlets are using that method from there, but there's also that day I'm Elf Guild with the eyes, but they're nothing special. However, with some manipulations in the networks, that could be considered an accident. Despite sending so many corpses into a dungeon, none of the rewards were improved, and the dungeon is basically at level 15, wasting the teleportation portal he had prepared earlier. So based on this information we've just discovered, this means that maybe our hero used some bud to survive the entire accident they had planned behind the scenes. But he also wonders if someone from his group ended up taking the reward, which alarms him, saying it was impossible. He set up that whole accident to get a very valuable reward inside that portal, but well, he was also closely watching all the movements inside, and no one and nothing could enter or leave from there but the manager, who was listening to all this. Is surprised to see that he was so focused on watching that dungeon to see if anyone entered or left, since he ends up discovering that someone really managed to get out of that dungeon, but alive. Moreover, it wasn't just one person, but two people survive. Besides, this person passed by him a little earlier, and they alone managed to conquer a hand chief dungeon on their own. He asks him to forget about the reward completely, and now to focus solely on capturing our protagonist and eliminating him. He agrees with this, but well, he survived several level 20 plus adventures and in the end survived the collapse of a double dungeon, and he wonders what he managed to gain at the end of all this. But now the scene changes to our hero. As he leaves a bank, he feels sad about one thing, that the loot from a dungeon was basically too little. He thought he wanted to earn a fortune, but didn't earn anything, since according to certain association rules, all the dungeon loot belongs to the association, but he has a small right to a share of the profit. In today's world, adventurers are likely to suffer and bleed to make a little bit of bread, and here half of it all goes to the association, and they ends up with almost nothing. So many people in the beginning always give up because it was very difficult to get good equipment and good resources. But what surprises our hero at this moment is the system that ended up giving some extra profits to Chang. So at this moment he also ends up discovering that upon completing a task he gains rewards, and the rewards were good, and because he managed to eliminate a large portion of the ducks and that dungeon, it means that the next ones will have fewer dogs and the dungeons, which will be a big advantage for him. Though us looking down, he kind of saw another screen of this system, but this one was different. Here someone from the underworld handed him something. This thing was a type of pill that RAM remodeled everything he needed. What it means is that this will reshape his skills, which may be tuning her much better, allowing him to become much more powerful in the future, which leaves our hero gaping. His happiness was such that the pen was surprised, and then he explains to the pen that what he won was huge, which will allow him to also overcome many bigger obstacles that are appearing in his future. So we also end up discovering something that, by the way, this thing will allow him to reach several levels, but in the country now currently he has already managed to achieve something that no one else has managed to achieve. For you to be a powerful level 5 guy, you needed 452 points, but to reach that was very difficult, and for that the state helps. But after you reach that, the state throws you away, since maybe you can no longer be leveling up after that. Also, the higher the materials from the monsters, the rarer and more powerful they become, and at this point adventurers must rely much more on combat equipped, meant to fight the monsters, but always the first adventurers with weak classes are greatly disadvantaged by the unfair loot claim from the guild association, so they basically need to focus on training until they can't anymore, since they can't afford good equipment to help them. Therefore these types of Yahello and much more on there for Ezekiel training to survive in at dungeon. If he then uses the XP cards he has, he can already reach level 5. But for that he will need to train at the guild later. However, he ended up getting this thing from the system, and then the system asks him if he really wanted to be using it, thus accepting the scene cuts. A few days later he was in a place where he could be getting enormous information about this skill. He has something that the pen didn't like and wanted to pull him out of that room by all means, since the pen wanted to have fun, not stay stuck here looking for useless information. Moreover, he ended up discovering that he also became quite resistant, but this is due to some things he has in his system. But for now he shouldn't focus on these comments, but on strength and agility. This looks exactly like a random game stat panel. Looking in another direction, he realizes that even the most recognized one, which is known as the evidences skill, at the current level is not able to reveal much information about the class and numbers a certain person has, but often to get something many strategies are used, and he wonders how a class like that has such a powerful skill. However, after this the system shows something there that was written which leaves him a bit hilarious, and finding this thing to where TY did comments like this decide to appear out of nowhere. But although his stats are a bit higher than those of common people, it is still clear that he can't yet compare himself to the other adventurers. He still needs to find an opportunity to buy good equipment, but he also ends up wondering what it means showing there, or maybe this is the focus and the main point of his class. But after all, every class has a main focus. He uses mages as an example, who are a type of class like buffs, but there are also bards who focus more on using music as their support to fight. But he realizes that the main focus of his strategy are perhaps from the underworld is deaf, but this does not seem to be a very weak strategy, may be of little relevance, because by using these abilities gained from the system he realizes his mana runs out quickly, so this would be almost useless to use. But at that moment the pen appears and slaps our hero in the face, and ends up there saying to him not to stop being less dependent on your class, because your class was one of the strongest, and it was also so that they would listen, since he manages to control life and death. He also comments there that he still hasn't been able to acquire the thing he wants so much, and because he hasn't unlocked certain items yet, so he ends up remembering that maybe it's the book that comes with the pan, and if it was about that, it was basically something the king of hell used in mythology to basically record human life, to be able to write or literally revive someone. This resembles another class. It would be a necromancer or class, and in this world this class would be a common class. But well, the pen told him not to underestimate his ability. Again, that necromancer ability was not a useless ability, since those abilities were just stealing his clients. But looking at the pen's stance, he realizes that maybe the ability to control the dead and the living isn't so useless after all. At this moment, Then the pen starts explaining some mega important things to our hero, but while he starts talking there only force the system to start jumping things up so that nothing makes sense, nothing connects. What's implied is that the system was basically censoring our pen from giving the main and most important information. The system's task is to guide the panel. After all, they are basically something that controls the elements, which are somewhat common in the game. But now this was in real life, so when investigating the hidden class, the eye of the dungeon record also involves some gods, but to know this information, he wonders if anyone has really ever entered a mythological dungeon to discover all of this, but well, strangely there is no record that anyone was ever judged. That judgment was basically placed on the player, or but for some reason he ends up wondering why he was the only one to receive this kind of punishment. But well, the truth is that he just discovered that maybe this is all perhaps a cheat, like having a cheat of trickery inside the game, so it would be a fair punishment. But also looking at the other side, he also got something else. It was passing that test of the gods, but now that he has passed the test of the gods, he ended up gaining certain qualifications. So he asks that, and what these qualifications are, the and then responds to our hero that this thing is like. You need to be basically reaching a point to discover if there's a sword or maybe other good things for you to pick up. So to discover more about the system, he will have to level up. The higher the level he reaches, the more he will be discovering about his own system. Now that he has discovered some more clues about the system, he can already leave that for later, since his priority now is leveling up. Since reaching level C, he will have an extremely high difficulty, and leveling up to level 10 or 15 now, with his confidence a little higher. But also in the world, a certain guild was throwing a party. This guild was putting several investigators on a certain person. That certain person was the guy who betrayed our protagonist. The objective of this elven guild is just to find out what really happened in a recent incident where several people ended up dying inside, but the elven guild wasn't making any progress. So they ended up taking that and putting it all over the internet, and it exploded in minutes. Also, the person who tried to disguise and planned all of this must be very strong. Moreover, if it weren't for the help of the system, it's very likely that this matter would have died inside that dungeon. But with the help of the system, he managed to spread the rumor that there was something strange inside that dungeon where several old people died. But well, since there were strong people involved in this thing, our hero just wanted to stay away from this matter, since at the moment he was very weak, and if by any chance he tried to get into this whole fight, it's very likely that in the end he wouldn't survive all the joke. But anyway, these people will come out after him, so for that he needs to get strong. Since he doesn't have maybe a third life, he saw it by great luck, then he already got a second life, and that's why he has to get strong. But changing the subject, out of nowhere he wonders who were the two people who survived in that dungeon, and here he says the name. If it was a certain Shannon and others were, well, Harry said that it was almost impossible to recognize. He just said that only two people survived, and he didn't know the names of the people who survived yet, but they managed to hide. This was enough for the two to survive the whole fight inside that dungeon. But grabbing his necklace, he starts looking at the subject that was happening on the internet, but he sees there that in the subject the names of his friends or the names of the survivors were not mentioned. It's likely that they hid the names of these people to avoid rumors. But now our protagonist wonders if maybe those two were his friends who perhaps survived. So for that, the two should be go there to investigate a little more closely. So the next day our hero arrives shamelessly at the hospital and asks if someone had survived from that ranked dungeon they had gone to, and if he could get more detailed information. He said it was someone important from his family, and he wanted to know the information to find out if they were alive, and for that the woman there would check, since in that dungeon almost everyone had died. Then they moved deeper into the hospital, but out of nowhere and I have something appears inside a portal, and that I was from frogs. Those frogs stretch their Huns and head towards the people who were there and end up being caught and taken inside that portal. But from another place, we observe a rich girl scolding her servant, who for some reason was forcing her to come to the hospital, as she had participated in some dungeon, and in the end she ended up getting hurt, but she was quite busy these days, and while talking about it, one of those frogs tons grabs her and pulls her into that dimension. But from another place that Hun goes into other rooms where it grabs several people, but among these people trapped in that hospital we only observe some hunters seeing that something was going to happen to the patients in that hospital. He steps in front and tells them to be careful and he ended up being caught. But other nurses were also caught in this game. Meanwhile, from another place, our protagonist wonders why monsters were appearing inside a hospital, and also aware that was taking them. But to answer that, one of those tons hums his way and grabs Chanaba to avoid being caught. He tries to dodge, but he doesn't help much because in the end he was caught and dragged into a portal. Now, inside the portal, he sees that he was teleported inside. After looking ahead, he realizes that several people ended up inside that portal too. Some were just being treated, and now they were inside that dimension. While everyone was complaining, a pink-haired girl points forward and says that someone was ahead. At this moment they are sent into a different castle. Inside this castle he was surprised by the size of this gigantic castle. While surprised by this, a system screen appears, saying that they were sent as a guy, but inside this is a guy. A war of frogs was happening, so the heroes were sent with only one objective: to fight against the frog and save the certain kingdom. As soon as the people observe that thing appearing in front of them, they are surprised to see that they were in another world. But as soon as they can complete this mission, they will win a kiss from this princess, which makes some guys happy about it. But this is a Pokemon of sorts of portal options. There are countless undiscovered portals in the world, but he still wonders if there is an unknown portal inside a hospital that suddenly appeared, but he thinks that impossible. This was a newborn portal, so carried as said that they could wait a bit to see what was happening at this moment. He also notices that some people were caught, like 12 of them. They are divided into some people. 10 are adventurers, 2 are individuals with no power at all who are common people, but among the strongest advance years the ones who were around there. These 2 from here, where the strongest one was already level 9, while the other was level 8. So to pass this challenge for them, there would be no difficulty at all. However, here, from another place, that rich girl appears who says she's not in the mood to stay, and this thing here, no, she asks for these 2 stronger adventurers to fight the boss as quickly as possible to end this. And in the back there was a guy who was just a regular person. He just wanted to get out of this place and didn't want to get involved in a situation like this. And then we find out that these are the lone wolves. What this means is that it's a huge risk among them here inside the dungeon. They are guys who invade dungeons, and basically they have random SP, which means the guild has no control over these passages, so he knows they will clear everything inside no matter who it is, and his goal now is to eliminate these 2 as fast as possible. But also this portal just appeared, and so it wasn't a good idea to be acting so stupidly from here, so he should have been acting more calmly to solve all the situations that will happen ahead. At this moment, he advances towards those level 8 and level 9 hunters here, calling their attention. They turned in his direction, but one of them starts holding his head while the other was already trying to do some things with Shan. But the reason for acting this way was that they were afraid that our hero would take their resources. But he said he wasn't up for that. No, he just asked them to be careful. But he looks at him and realizes that he was level 4. What did a level 4 guy think he was doing here, giving orders to level 8 guys? This was a dream for them. Despite these guys being completely stupid and too reckless, he realizes there's something more to these guys. They are both quite so strong, but at this moment when he was kind of being bothered by these 2 guys, we see other people in the background thinking that what he was doing was too stupid, because they are basically inside an unknown portal. but it looks like a stupid hunter from here, who would already be planning something stupid from here, but the moment he was going to do something we observe some stopping him with a single force. Besides, he agrees with our hero that they shouldn't act in a stupid way, but right, he realizes that the two were high level, because why would a high level guy be showing such a negative emotion that he is healing Flower-chan? But as soon as the whole situation calmed down, the pink-haired girl approaches our hero and starts scolding him, saying that he was stupid to be in that way. These portals here are not under the guild's control, which means that the people inside can do whatever they want. Knowing that she would continue with that scolding, he apologizes and understands what really happened, but he thinks that the MCC here can handle these monsters, only that from another place two others appear and tell them to be careful, as they didn't want to die. Right, they are two regular people. What would they be doing? They can't fight monsters. The most that what happened to them if a monster appeared